Hello friends, welcome back to Aunt Debbie's Boutique. Today we're going to make a jewelry roll, a quilted jewelry roll like this. And it's got 3 zipper pockets in it. And the purpose of this is to be able to keep your jewelry when you travel, keep it from getting lost in with all your other luggage. So it could also be used for, for anything, but one thing that came to mind was power cords and chargers and all the electronics we have nowadays. They all have, earphones and all that. This would be a nice way to store those. If you wanted to use it for cosmetics, I would suggest you use sew it out of vinyl or laminated cotton because it would get dirty pretty easily with cosmetics. But this makes a very nice gift, and to tell you the truth, I received something similar from a friend when I was just getting out of college, and I was in her wedding, and she made all of the bridesmaids a jewelry roll like this, and not like this. This is my own pattern, but it was similar to this, and I still have it to this day. So that was like in 1977. So I have used it a lot. Okay. What we're going to need, first of all, is 3 11-inch zippers. You might get away with 9-inch zippers, but I like to have extra and trim them down. We're going to need a main fabric and a lining fabric, and we need one of them cut 21 inches long by 10 inches wide, and the other one is cut 16 inches long by 10 inches wide. So you need both a lining and the outside fabric in those two dimensions, and some batting, or what I'm using today is fusible fleece, which works just like batting. I happen to have some of it, and so I decided to use it on this. This is what it is. It's by Pellon. It's 987F quilting fleece, 100% polyester. So I'm using that today. Then you're going to need about 3 yards of 1/2-inch double fold bias tape. I made my own because I wanted it to coordinate with what I was making, and you know how the bias tape choices at the store are kind of limited. So you could either use one package of that or make your own, and I have a video I'll link in the description box on different ways to make your own bias tape, but I've already done that for us. Now this is a very simple pattern. The only thing that is time consuming about it is the quilting part. And and if you have your brand name like I do, you'll need one of your labels. Okay, I've gone ahead and quilted the bigger piece. I quilted this on 1-inch squares set at a 45-degree angle. And the reason I set it at an angle instead of just going up and down is when it's at an angle, it's much more forgiving. If you happen to have a not so straight seam when you're all set, or not so straight edge when you're all said and done, and you've quilted it up and down and like this, and you have a quilting seam that goes like that, it's just going to scream, I'm crooked. So having it already crooked to begin with hides a lot of mistakes. So I hope you can see that. And I went ahead and did that to save us time. Okay, but we'll do the smaller one together so that you can see how we do it. Just have strings everywhere. Okay, this is the fleece, and this is the fusible side. I'm going to put it with my right side. A lot of times I'll put it with the lining, but it really holds it nice for quilting. So we just have to follow the manufacturer's directions, and it takes a little while to heat this up to the point that it sticks. Now we're still going to have to use our 505 adhesive spray to put the other side on, but at least one side will be adhered without it. Okay, I'm going to use a little bit of 505 temporary adhesive to put the lining on. I'm getting kind of low on this, so I'm going to have to order some more. We want to make sure our directional prints are going the same way. I'm not sure if this is directional or not, but this kind of looks like it's up, and this kind of looks like it's up. So I'm going to lay it on here. And glue it down. Okay, it's time to mark our grid on here. Now, to make a 45-degree angle to get started, I have some 45-degree marks on my cutting board here. And so I can line up one corner and get it all on here nice and square. And then lay my ruler on this line and draw your first line. Now, if you don't have a nice grid like this, what you can do is measure, and this should be 10 inches here, and then measure up 10 inches and put a mark there and draw your first line. It's equal distance on both sides, and that makes 45 degrees. Now, you want a clear ruler so you can see through, and I'm lining that line I just drew up on this line right here and making another one. And I'm going to continue on until I get all this direction lined up, and then I'll tell you how to get the next direction. Now to get the other way, I'm going to take one of these clear lines that's perpendicular to the line I'm drawing on, and I'm going to line it up on one of these lines. And then look down, and they may not fall exactly on the line because you have thickness of your drawing instrument that makes this come out a little more than an inch, but they should all be parallel with these lines. And then I'm going to draw my first line here. And continue on drawing all of them in this direction. Now that we've got our grid all drawn, I'm going to take it over the machine and I'm going to start in one corner. And I'm going to sew up a line, then right across the edge till I get to the next line. Come up it, sew to the edge till I get to the next line. Do that the whole way, not cutting my thread till I get to this end. Then I'll start on another corner going the other direction and sew it. That way we won't have broken threads on the front side of our quilting, and it'll look nice and smooth. Another thing is, when you're sewing, if you'll kind of hold your hands in like you're pulling it apart as you're sewing, that'll keep it nice and straight and it won't bunch up like it can has a tendency to do. You can also use a walking foot, which I have, but I rarely get it out. I probably should, because some people swear by them. I just haven't ever gotten used to using one. But a walking foot, the feed dogs feed the bottom fabric, and the walking foot feeds the top at the same rate, so that everything should stay nice and even on your top and your bottom, and one side shouldn't bunch up while the other one stays flat. Okay, let's take this over to the sewing machine and sew this up in warp speed. Well, you got to see me quilt at least about half of it. I realized after I turned and started going the second direction, I hadn't turned the camera on. So I apologize for that, but you probably saw enough. Okay, I'm going to iron this. Okay, it's hot now. Steam it real good too, and you can see all of those marks are gone. And that is a very nice and neat quilting job. That pulling it apart really helps it. Okay, now this is the outside of our bag, and this is the top, and we're going to measure down 4.5 inches. Let's do it this way. And again, this is a temporary mark. Okay, that is where we're going to start putting our pockets on. On this, let's see if it needs to be trimmed up ever so slightly. Actually, I think it's fine. I just want to make sure and trim the top nice and straight, because we're going to start cutting it from the top. Now, I'm going to go down 1.5 inches and put a mark. Then from that, I'm going to go down Well, we don't even have to mark it. We can cut it while we're at it. Let's do that. I'm going to go 1.5 inches from the top. That's going to be our first piece that we use. Then we're going to go 4.5. Cut our next piece. And I want to keep them in order so the pattern, if there's any pattern, it stays in order. 4.5 again. And our last 4.5. We just have a little bit to cut off the bottom here. Okay, I'm going to turn them like this. Now, we can either put the lining side up like I did in the one I made previously, or we can put the outside fabric, and the only lining fabric will be at the top and when you open the pockets. And since I did this one with the all lining fabric, I think I'm going to do this one by using the outside fabric on the inside too. So this is how it's going to work. There's going to be that little strip, a zipper, another strip, another zipper, our last strip, our last zipper, and then our last strip. So that's how we're going to put it together. So we're going to start by, first of all, we want to make sure our zipper works. We want to make sure it's on our left hand. Maybe I should turn it so you can see it instead of me. That our zipper opens from our left to the right. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to center it between the pull and the end of this, because we're going to end up cutting this off. We're going to bring the pull in when we do it. But now we can use the double-sided tape here like I've used in most of my videos to do zippers, but this is so short that I am just going to clip it. And you can also put on your zipper foot at this time if you want, but we're going to stitch about a 1/4 inch. We're going to stitch pretty close to the edge because we want some of that zipper to show. And so my regular foot is narrow enough that it just fits right there between the teeth and where I want to sew, and I'm just going to use my regular foot. If yours is too wide for that, go ahead and put your zipper foot on and just stitch about a 1/4 inch, maybe a little less. Okay, I'm going to go to the machine and do this. Now then, I want to, on the back, I want the zipper to be open. So I want to iron this towards, and I don't know if I explained good enough. The way we're going to put our zipper is we lay right side on top of our zipper. And then when we open it up, the right side shows. So let's iron this, and it's going to be a thick little seam here. But as long as you iron it, you shouldn't have any trouble with it. Then I'm going to turn it over on this side. and I'm going to go top stitch right down that on top of that to hold it in place. Okay, before we put on the next piece, let's cut a strip of our bias tape and let's get it on this top piece. I'm going to go to the back side, open it up, and by the way, if you made your own, you can just use 2-inch bias strips and you don't have to fold it into tape. We can do that as we go if you want, but we're going to open it up. And I'm going to take a 1/2-inch seam on the back side here, which is where the fold should be. And then we'll bring it around to the top and top stitch it on there. So let's do make sure we got some sticking out on both sides. Let's do our 1/2-inch seam. Okay, you'll notice I put it on the back side first so that I can wrap it around to the front, and we want to be able to hide that seam, so it needs to just barely cover our seams. You may have to tug on it a little bit. And then I'm going to top stitch that. Now we have our bias tape across the top here. And steam that really good. And if you have trouble when you fold it over getting it to cover your seam, you know, to hide the seam you just stitched, just trim your seam allowance a little bit and then it'll be easier to fold over. Now, I'm going to pull this zipper back and I'm going to stitch across this end so I don't accidentally pull it off. Let me do that real quick. Okay. Now then, I'm going to trim all this off with the edge. And you can even do it with your blade. It might be a little smoother if you did that. Well, I just trimmed off where I sewed it, so I'm going to have to go back and sew it again. Okay. Now then, we're ready to add the next piece. So we're just going to pick this up, fold it over right side on top of our zipper. And here's the important part. We want to make sure we get this lined up with the part we've already sewn. We don't want it to be like this. That's exaggerated, but you're going to end up having to cut your bag down a whole lot if you do that. So I am going to make sure that both ends are even if I have to kind of stretch it a little bit, because that quilting can kind of make your fabric shrink up. Now I'm going to take it over to the machine and sew on the other side of this zipper. Now we need to iron this open. Once again, I'm going to start at the back so that my zipper, we don't want any of this fabric getting in the way of our zipper and getting caught in our zipper. So that's why we're ironing it away from the zipper. And when you're stitching, it helps to move the pull out of your way, and I didn't do it when I put the zipper on. I should have. But I'm going to go back over there and stitch right next to this. When I get around the pull, I'll stop and move it so I can stay nice and neat, just like we did the top one. That's, I don't know, a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch away from the seam. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, we've got that part put on. Now we want to put on this zipper. So we're going to fold it over. We're going to center it again so that the little metal part here is off of one end and our zipper pull is off the other end. It will make it easier to sew. And once again, I'm going to clip it. But you could use the double-sided tape to hold it in place. The only thing is it has to be pretty narrow tape because we're taking a very narrow seam so that part of our zipper shows. Okay, I'm going to go sew this one. Okay, we've sewed this. We want to iron it away and top stitch. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and sew the next one on, and then I'll iron and top stitch both of these. Now, once again, we want to make sure our sides are lined up. That's real critical. Unless you just want a really skinny bag. Because we're going to have to trim them down to where everything is even. Okay, I'm going to take that over to the machine, and then I'll come back and iron it and top stitch it. Okay, even though I lined it up, would you look at this? This is scooted over a little bit. It's real easy to do, so I'm probably going to I could take it out and redo it. But I'll probably just trim it down a little bit in the final product. Okay, let's open our zipper. We want it flat. Now I'm going to top stitch. I'm going to pull this back here, and I'm going to top stitch here on the edges so my zipper pull doesn't come out. Okay, we have two of our zippers in. I'm going to trim off this excess. We are going to cut this down to 9 inches. I'm hoping that I don't have to cut mine any smaller, but I may. Okay, the last, excuse me, last zipper. I'm going to fold it over on here. Open it up and fold this up on there and sew it and open it up and then top stitch it. So I'm going to do all that at one time. Unfortunately, from this point forward, my camera switched to warp speed, so I'll have to narrate what I'm doing. Right here, I'm top stitching the last zipper. Now I'm trimming the pockets to 9 inches wide. Then I'm going to lay it on top of the back and line it up with our line that's 4.5 inches from the top. I'm trimming the back to match the pockets on the sides and bottom. I'm clipping it in place and stitching at 1/4 inch on those 3 sides. Now I'm drawing an erasable line 1/2 inch above the 2 bottom zippers. We will stitch on these lines to divide the pockets. I've cut a 30-inch piece of the bias tape and I'm turning the ends to the inside and stitching it on both sides. It is 1/2 inches wide when finished. Folded the strip in half and marked the center. Then I measured 4.5 inches from the top and found the center there. I pinned the tie center point to the back center point and will catch it in the first seam we sew on the pockets. Now I'm sewing the top of the pockets on the bias tape line. Then I'm stitching the 2 lines we drew 1/2 inch above the zippers, being careful not to catch the tie in these 2 seams. I'm ironing the bag on the 3 stitching lines we just sewed. Next, I'm rounding the edges of the top flap. Starting at the bottom, I'm sewing the rest of the opened bias tape to the inside using a 1/2 inch seam. Miter the corners just like a quilt or potholder binding. When we turn the last corner, stop and cut the excess bias tape off, leaving enough for a 1/4 inch seam joining the 2 pieces. Then sew the remainder of the bottom. I'm pressing the seam, then wrapping the rest of the bias tape to the outside and pinning it in place. Be sure to cover the seam you just made, even if you have to trim the seam allowance a little to give room to wrap over. Then top stitch it in place and iron the entire bag. All right, here is our finished product. One that's rolled up and one that's opened out so you can see all the pockets. There's plenty of room in here to put all your jewelry or cables or whatever you want to use it for. It'll make a good travel mate. Okay, I hope you have enjoyed this, and if you did, please give it a like. And if you have not subscribed, would you please subscribe too? Until next time, remember, whatever you do, do it to the glory of the Lord.